There's a town in Alaska where, in the dead of winter, the entire population could fit inside a single pickup truck. 4 people. That's it. It was almost named after a local bird, except nobody could agree how to spell the bird's name. So they picked something else instead, something that's been getting a laugh out of people for over 100 years. And unlike almost every other gold rush town in this state, it never actually died. Stick around, because by the end of this, you'll know exactly why. Let's take a closer look. This is Chicken, Alaska, a gold rush town out in the 40-mile mining district, close enough to the Canadian border that the road and the northern lights both seem to just keep going forever. Its year-round population has been officially counted as low as 4 people. Stick with me until the end, because the real story behind this town's name is a lot stranger than the version everybody repeats. And most people who've heard the joke have no idea what actually happened. Gold turned up along the 40-mile river back in 1886, more than a decade before the far more famous Klondike Rush turned this whole region into a magnet for prospectors from everywhere. By the time gold showed up, specifically in the creek that would eventually give this town its name, more than 700 miners were already working the streams of the southern 40-mile district between 1896 and 1898. A tent camp went up almost overnight to serve them, and by 1902, the growing settlement needed an official name to get a post office. Here's the story everyone tells. The miners wanted to name the place after the ptarmigan, a grouse-like bird that was everywhere in the area and a real lifesaver on the dinner table during hard winters. Problem was, according to the tale, nobody in the room could agree on how to spell it. Rather than risk the town's sign becoming a punchline, they went with something a whole lot simpler: chicken. By the early 1900s, the town had grown to around 400 people, with a hotel, a school, all the basics a real boomtown needed. The Chicken Creek Hotel, built in 1906, is still standing today. One of about a dozen original buildings that now make up the Chicken Historic District on the National Register of Historic Places. Now, what actually happened to that population over the next century and how much of that spelling story holds up is a lot more interesting than the joke most visitors walk away with. Let's start with just how cut off this place still is. Chicken sits along the Taylor Highway, a narrow, mostly unpaved road that connects the town to the rest of interior Alaska and eventually to the top of the World Highway, heading into Canada's Yukon. For a good chunk of the year, that connection basically vanishes. The Taylor Highway isn't maintained through the winter, and it closes down completely for months, cutting Chicken off from regular road access entirely. That's exactly why the population here swings so hard depending on the season. In the dead of winter, with the road shut and temperatures dropping to numbers most people would never willingly deal with, official counts have put the year-round population at just 4. Once the road reopens and summer rolls around, that number jumps into the hundreds. Seasonal miners, business owners, tourists, all showing up to a town that, months earlier, had been left to a small handful of people tough enough to winter it out. There's no real cell service to fall back on out here, no big infrastructure, and no guarantee of fast help if something goes wrong during those isolated winter stretches. Not many American towns, even in Alaska, swing this hard between a busy little summer scene and a skeleton crew just holding things together. And here's the part that actually sets Chicken apart. Unlike most of the Alaska gold camps that emptied out the second the boom ended, this one never really did. So what's actually still happening in these hills, more than 100 years after the first prospectors showed up? Here's the thing that makes Chicken different from almost every other Alaska gold town. The mining never actually stopped. The 40-mile mining district is still one of the longest continuously producing placer gold regions in the entire state, with active claims being worked right now, using everything from small suction dredges to bigger modern placer operations. That's really the whole reason this town is still standing. Most boom towns die because the resource runs dry and there's nothing left to keep people around. Chicken's economy has always had two legs under it: the ongoing gold production that still pulls working miners out here, and more recently, tourism built around the town's history, its name, and gold panning experiences sold directly to people driving the Taylor Highway. The Pedro Dredge, a massive piece of historic mining equipment, moved to Chicken in 1959 and now preserved as a National Historic Site, stands as a physical reminder of that legacy. One of the only dredges of its kind in the whole state, still open for people to walk up and look at. These days, Chicken's small population and bigger summer crowds get by on 2 RV parks, a couple of cafes, gift shops, gas, and guided walking tours led by longtime locals. A tiny but real tourism economy sitting right on top of a mining district that, believe it or not, hasn't gone completely quiet since 1886. Life, for the handful of year-round residents, looks almost nothing like life here in the busy summer months. Through winter, with the highway shut and temperatures often hitting genuinely brutal lows, the few people who stick around are, pretty much literally, on their own, without much chance of fast outside help if something goes sideways. Come summer, all of that flips. The population jumps into the hundreds, seasonal miners back on their claims, business owners reopening the cafes and the saloon, and a steady trickle of travelers making the drive specifically to see one of the last real surviving gold rush towns in Alaska. The Chicken Creek Saloon becomes, by pretty much every account, the actual heart of the place during these months. Miners swapping stories about the day's finds, travelers passing through, long-time locals who've watched this exact same cycle play out year after year. And the cinnamon rolls at the town cafe have, according to more than a few travel write-ups, become almost as big a draw as the mining history itself. It's a strange rhythm for an American town to keep up. Not just seasonal tourism, but a population that shrinks down to single digits and then jumps nearly 100-fold every single year for over a century now. Which brings us back to that name and a story that's not quite as tidy as most visitors get told. Beyond the day-to-day mining and hospitality side of things, Chicken has built a small but real identity around a few specific draws that pull people well out of their way along the Taylor Highway. Recreational gold panning is one of the biggest, letting visitors try the exact activity that built this town on ground where actual gold still, genuinely, turns up sometimes. Every June, the town puts on Chicken Stock, a music festival that pulls in performers and visitors from across interior Alaska and beyond. A pretty unlikely event for a town with a year-round population you can count on one hand. But it's become a real fixture on the summer calendar and a real source of income for a place otherwise entirely dependent on mining and passing tourist traffic. Guided historic walking tours led by longtime residents add another layer, turning the town's own survival story into the thing people are actually paying to hear about, rather than the scenery. Less about the view, more about the simple fact that this place is somehow still here. All of that, the tours, the festival, the panning, the cinnamon rolls, exists because enough people have decided year after year that keeping Chicken going is worth the trouble. But that name everyone comes here curious about, turns out the real story's a bit messier than what gets told at the saloon. Getting to Chicken means driving the Taylor Highway, a scenic but mostly unpaved road running from Tetlin Junction on the Alaska Highway, cutting through remote boreal forest for about 75 miles before you reach Chicken itself, with the option to keep going toward the Canadian border and the top of the World Highway into Yukon. This isn't a drive to take lightly. The road's unpaved for long stretches, prone to washboarding and mud depending on the weather, and, this is the big one, closed entirely through winter. Road access to Chicken only exists for a defined window each year, roughly from spring thaw to the first real snowfall of autumn. There's no commercial air service here, and no real alternative to the Taylor Highway if you're coming by land. For the few residents who stay through winter, that means accepting months of real isolation as just part of living here, not some rare inconvenience. That seasonal access is exactly what drives Chicken's wild population swing. And it's also what's kept a town this small and this historic from getting swallowed up by more conventional Alaska tourism routes. Getting here has always taken real effort on a road that, for part of the year, simply isn't there. A few details about Chicken tend to catch people off guard. Despite what most tourists hear at the saloon, historians who've actually dug into it say the classic couldn't spell ptarmigan story looks largely made up. The tale didn't really start circulating widely until the 1940s, nearly 50 years after the town was founded, which means the charming version everybody repeats might be closer to folklore than fact. The Pedro Dredge, now sitting in Chicken as a National Historic Site, wasn't actually built there at all. It originally ran in the Fairbanks mining district before getting hauled over to Chicken in 1959, making it more of an adopted piece of history than something native to the town. Chicken was one of the first two towns in all of Alaska to formally incorporate, back in 1902, a genuinely big historical footnote for a place whose winter population over a century later, you can count on one hand. And chicken clearly doesn't mind the joke. From gift shop merchandise built entirely around the name to an actual independent short film about it, titled No Joke, Chicken, 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 the town leans into the punchline rather than running from it. Keeping a town this small, alive year-round, comes with real, ongoing problems. Winters here mean genuine isolation for whoever sticks it out, with limited emergency services, no promise of quick outside help, and stretches of weeks where temperatures drop to dangerous extremes. The seasonal economy adds its own kind of instability. Nearly all of Chicken's tourism income has to happen in a short summer window, since the closed winter highway wipes out visitor traffic completely for months at a time. Active mining claims all around town also mean a lot of the surrounding land is private property tied to working operations, which limits public access and keeps visitors confined to specific tourist areas. A real tension between the working mining district Chicken still is and the tourist stop it's also become. And then there's the bigger question every tiny American town like this eventually runs into: how do you keep any year-round population at all when the reality of winter isolation and limited services gives younger people so little reason to stay instead of moving somewhere a lot less demanding? Ask the handful of people who winter over in Chicken why they stay, and you get an answer that's a little different from most other remote towns on this channel. An active, ongoing connection to mining itself. Not just a story passed down from ancestors, but a real, current livelihood. Unlike ghost towns, where people stick around after the original industry is long gone, some of Chicken's residents are still out there working gold claims today. The same basic activity that built this town back in 1886 is, for a few people, still just part of daily life, not something they only talk about. There's also real pride in being part of a place this small and this odd that simply refused to become another abandoned town site swallowed up by the forest. Longtime locals talk about it less like nostalgia and more like something they're actively keeping alive. And that pride ties right back to the real story behind this town's name, which it turns out is a lot messier than the simple spelling joke most visitors leave with. Let's finally get into what's actually true and what's just a good story. The charming version almost every visitor hears at the Chicken Creek Saloon goes like this. Miners in 1902 wanted to name their new post office after the ptarmigan, couldn't agree on the spelling, and settled on chicken instead. Over the decades, that story's basically become the town's official origin myth, repeated in brochures, historical markers, and just about every article ever written about the place, including most of what you've heard in this video so far. But dig into where that story actually comes from, and it gets murkier. Historians tracing its roots have found it doesn't really show up in writing until the 1940s, nearly 40 years after the town was actually founded in 1902. That gap raises a fair question. How much of the beloved spelling story reflects what really happened in that founding meeting, versus a good tale that got more polished and more widely repeated every time somebody told it. What seems more solid is this. Ptarmigan really were everywhere in the area and really did save prospectors during rough winters. And chicken was, one way or another, the name that stuck when the post office got registered in 1902. Whether that came from one specific spelling argument in one specific meeting, or just kind of evolved as an informal nickname that eventually became official, might never get fully sorted out. Honestly, that uncertainty fits this town pretty well. Chicken, Alaska never really needed a perfectly documented origin story to become one of the most talked about tiny towns in the state. A population you can count on one hand, a gold rush that never fully ended, and a name that gets a smile out of people before they even know the history. Verified origin story or not, that combination has kept this place going for over a century, and it doesn't look like stopping anytime soon. There's something kind of great about a town this small, still getting talked about, joked about, and deliberately sought out by travelers more than 100 years after its gold rush peak. Not despite how small it is, but almost because of it. Chicken never turned into a real ghost town, and it never turned into a real city either. It just kept going. 4 people at a time through the hard months, hundreds at a time once the road opens back up, gold still coming out of the same hills it always has. Maybe that's the actual story here. Not some perfectly documented spelling argument, but a town that, whatever really happened back in 1902, decided a long time ago it wasn't going anywhere. If you find meaning in these forgotten coordinates, consider subscribing to the map. Together, we'll keep rescuing these places from the silence of history.